Most riders think they're treating their bikes right. Regular oil changes, clean chain, fresh gas. But here's what nobody tells you. You're probably killing your engine right now. You won't know it until you're staring at a $3,000 rebuild estimate. The damage isn't from miles or age. It's from habits you repeat every single ride. Habits that feel harmless but are quietly turning a reliable motor into a grenade with a slow-burning fuse. These aren't obscure mechanic secrets or some advanced engineering theory. This is basic physics that nobody bothers explaining because they assume you already know. Spoiler alert, most riders don't. So here's the deal. I'm breaking down 5 engine-killing habits and the real reason they destroy your motor. Not the surface level, it's bad for your bike nonsense. The actual mechanical carnage happening inside your engine while you're cruising down the street thinking everything's fine. The cold start disaster. Let's start with the one that gets almost everyone, cold starts. And I don't mean starting your bike when it's cold outside, I mean what you do in those first 60 seconds after firing up an engine that's been sitting overnight. Here's what's actually happening inside your motor. When your bike sits for hours, oil settles at the bottom of the crankcase and thickens as it cools. That means when you thumb that starter button, your piston rings, cam bearings, and cylinder walls are basically running dry for the first minute or so. Now, most riders know you're supposed to warm up your bike, but here's where they mess up. They think warming up means letting it idle for 15 minutes in the driveway. Wrong. Or they think a quick 10-second idle is enough before they twist the throttle and take off. Also wrong. The real killer is revving a cold engine. You fire it up, hear that satisfying rumble, give it a couple blips of throttle because it sounds good, then ride off immediately. Feels harmless, right? Inside your engine, you're running sandpaper across your cylinder walls. Without proper oil circulation, metal grinds against metal. Piston rings scrape cylinder walls with minimal protection. Cam lobes slam into lifters without that crucial oil film. Those cam bearings, they're taking a beating every single cold start. This creates microscopic scratches on your cylinder walls. Not a big deal once or twice, but you do this every morning for a year, those scratches become grooves. Grooves become scoring. Scoring becomes compression loss and oil consumption. Eventually, you're looking at a top-end rebuild because you couldn't wait 60 seconds. Mechanics will tell you that most engine wear happens in that first minute after a cold start. Not at 10,000 miles, not during hard riding, but in those first few seconds when oil hasn't reached critical components yet. So what's the fix? Simple. Let it idle for about 60 seconds, not 15 minutes. Just long enough for oil pressure to build and oil to circulate through the engine. You'll hear the idle smooth out slightly when it's ready. Then, and this is crucial, ride gently for the first few minutes. Keep RPMs moderate. No hard acceleration. No redline pulls. Just smooth, easy riding until the engine reaches operating temperature. If you can't wait 60 seconds before riding off, you're not ready to ride. That's the hard truth. Now here's the flip side nobody talks about, short rides. If you're constantly taking 2-minute trips to the gas station or quick spins around the block, your oil never reaches proper operating temperature. It stays cold and thick, never burning off moisture and acids that build up from combustion. That moisture creates sludge. Those acids cause corrosion. Over time, your oil passages get gunked up, your oil can't do its job properly, and wear accelerates even though you're being careful with short, gentle rides. The solution? Take a proper 20 to 30 minute ride occasionally. Let that oil get hot enough to burn off the crud, and do what it's designed to do. Your engine needs to reach full operating temperature regularly, not just idle in the driveway or putter to the store. Cold starts wreck your top end. This next habit destroys your bottom end. Lugging and the RPM sweet spot. Lugging your engine is one of those mistakes that feels responsible but is actually wrecking your bike. You're cruising in 5th gear at 35 mph, engine grumbling and vibrating, and you think you're being smart by keeping RPMs low and saving gas. You're not saving anything. You're forcing your crankshaft and connecting rods to work way harder than they were designed to. Here's what lugging actually does. When you're in too high a gear for your speed, you're asking your engine to produce power at RPMs where it's not efficient. The combustion cycle is happening, but there's not enough rotational momentum to smooth out the power pulses. That creates low-frequency vibrations that rattle through your entire engine. Those vibrations loosen fasteners over time. They accelerate bearing wear. They put excessive strain on your bottom-end components that were never meant to handle that kind of stress at those speeds. Every engine has a power band, an RPM range where it makes power efficiently and smoothly. For most bikes, that's somewhere between 4,000 and 8,000 RPM, depending on the engine design. Below that range, you're forcing components to work harder than they should. The rule is simple. If your engine is grumbling and vibrating instead of pulling smoothly, you're in the wrong gear. Downshift. Let the engine breathe where it wants to breathe. I know what you're thinking. Won't higher RPMs wear out my engine faster? Not if you stay within the power band. Your engine was designed to operate in that range. What wears it out is forcing it to operate outside that range, either too low or too high. Stop treating 5th or 6th gear like cruise control at every speed. Learn where your bike's torque curve lives. Most bikes are happiest between 4,000 and 6,000 RPM for normal riding. That's where the engine produces good power without excessive stress. Now, let's talk about the other extreme, redlining. There's this myth that touching redline even once will explode your engine. That's not true. Briefly hitting redline on a healthy, warmed-up engine won't cause immediate damage. The redline exists as a safety margin, not an instant death zone. The problem is living at redline. Constantly running your engine at maximum RPM causes valve float, where the valves can't close fast enough and start bouncing. It stretches timing chains. It accelerates bearing wear. It puts extreme stress on every rotating component. Use your RPMs. Don't be afraid of them, but don't abuse them either. There's a massive difference between occasionally revving your bike through the power band and constantly banging off the limiter like you're auditioning for a race team. Wrong RPMs stress your internals from both directions. This next habit cooks your clutch and contaminates your oil. The clutch killers. Your clutch is designed to engage or disengage. That's it. Fully in or fully out. What it's not designed for is living in that gray zone halfway between the two, which is exactly what most riders do in traffic. Riding the clutch, keeping it partially engaged while you modulate speed, feels like good throttle control. It's not. It's friction and heat, lots of it, concentrated on your clutch plates every single time you feather that lever for more than a few seconds. Here's what actually happens. When the clutch is halfway engaged, the plates are slipping against each other. That slipping generates heat. Do it long enough and those plates start to glaze over. Once they glaze, they lose grip. Once they lose grip, they slip even more. That creates more heat, which creates more glazing, and now you're in a death spiral that ends with a burnt clutch. You'll know you've crossed that line when you smell burnt plastic or notice the clutch slipping at highway speeds. By then, the damage is done. But here's the kicker most riders don't think about. If you're running a wet clutch, which most modern bikes have, those clutch particles don't just disappear, they contaminate your engine oil. That oil is supposed to be lubricating your engine, but now it's got bits of burnt clutch material floating around in it, reducing its ability to protect your motor. So what's the fix for slow speed control? Use your throttle and rear brake instead of feathering the clutch. Fully engage or fully disengage that lever. Your hand will thank you, and so will your wallet when you're not replacing clutch plates every 15,000 miles. Now let's talk about hard launches. Dumping the clutch at high RPM might look cool in those parking lot burnout videos, but inside your bike, it's chaos. When you suddenly release a fully engaged clutch at 8,000 RPM, all that stored rotational energy transfers through your clutch, transmission, chain, and rear wheel in a split second. The clutch plates slam together violently. That generates extreme heat and can warp the plates or even crack them if you do it repeatedly. But the damage doesn't stop at the clutch. That violent surge of torque stretches your chain, wears your sprockets, and in severe cases can even damage your crankshaft bearings. And if you're popping wheelies during those hard launches, you're starving parts of your engine of oil. When the bike tilts back sharply, oil sloshes to the rear of the crankcase, leaving the oil pickup momentarily uncovered. Your oil pump sucks air instead of oil, and critical components go without lubrication for those few seconds. Do that enough times and you'll start seeing bearing damage, especially on bikes that weren't designed for stunt riding. The proper way to launch quickly, if you absolutely need to, is feeding the clutch out smoothly while rolling on throttle progressively. You can still accelerate hard. You're just spreading that stress evenly across your drivetrain instead of shock loading everything at once. One more clutch killer that nobody thinks about: sitting in gear at red lights with the clutch pulled in. Seems harmless, right? You're just waiting for the light to change. But when you hold that clutch lever in, you're putting constant pressure on your throwout bearing and clutch springs. Those components aren't designed to handle continuous pressure for minutes at a time. Over thousands of stops, that constant load shortens their lifespan significantly. Plus, if someone bumps you from behind, or your grip slips for even a second, your bike lurches forward unexpectedly. That's not just bad for your clutch, it's dangerous. The fix is dead simple. Shift to neutral if you're going to be stopped for more than a few seconds. Gives your hand a break, extends your clutch life, and eliminates that lurch forward risk. Clutch abuse is pretty obvious once you know what to look for. This next one sneaks up on you. Ignoring the warning signs. Here's the habit that separates riders who keep bikes running for 100,000 miles from those learning expensive lessons at 10,000. Paying attention to what your engine is telling you. Engines rarely fail without warning. They give you signs, sometimes subtle, sometimes obvious, that something's wrong. The problem is most riders ignore those signs until it's way too late. Overheating is the final boss of engine killers. When your engine gets too hot, metal expands. If your piston swells too much inside the cylinder, it can seize up completely. Cylinder walls get scuffed, the head warps, gaskets start leaking, valves stick in their guides. In extreme cases, you can crack the engine block itself. And here's the thing, modern bikes try to protect themselves. They have temperature gauges, warning lights, cooling fans that kick on automatically. But riders treat those warnings like suggestions instead of urgent problems that need immediate attention. So what are the actual warning signs you need to watch for? Your temperature gauge climbing higher than normal. That's the obvious one. But most riders don't even glance at their gauges until something feels wrong. Pinging or knocking sounds under load. That's your engine telling you combustion is happening at the wrong time, usually because it's too hot and fuel is igniting prematurely. The smell of hot coolant or burning oil. If you can smell it, you're already past the early warning stage. Steam coming from anywhere near your engine. That's not morning dew burning off, that's coolant boiling over. Intense heat on your legs that's noticeably worse than normal. Your bike always runs warm, but if it's suddenly cooking your thighs, something's wrong. Here's what actually happens when you ignore these signs and keep riding. Your piston expands from the heat. It starts dragging against the cylinder wall, creating friction that generates even more heat. Eventually, it seizes. The piston literally welds itself to the cylinder wall, and your engine locks up solid. Your oil breaks down from excessive heat and turns into sludge. Once that happens, it stops lubricating anything. You're basically running a dry engine even though your oil level looks fine. Valves expand and can seize in their guides, preventing them from opening and closing properly. That kills compression and can lead to valves smacking into pistons. Your coolant boils over, leaving nothing in the system to regulate temperature. Now you've got an engine running with zero cooling capacity, and temperatures spike into catastrophic territory fast. The idle trap is especially dangerous. Modern bikes manage heat pretty well when you're moving, because airflow over the radiator or cooling fins does most of the work. But sit still in traffic or at a long red light for 10 or 15 minutes. That airflow disappears and heat builds up fast. Your cooling fan will kick on, and if it's running constantly, that's your bike screaming at you that it's struggling. On air-cooled bikes, you don't even have that fan as a backup. No airflow means no cooling period. Carbureted bikes have an extra problem: vapor lock. When fuel in the float bowl gets too hot, it vaporizes and your engine starts running like garbage or stalls completely. So what do you actually do when temperatures start climbing? Pull over immediately. Not just make it home. Not I'm only 5 minutes away. Immediately. Turn off the engine and let it cool naturally. Don't try to speed up the process by pouring cold water on it or anything stupid like that. Thermal shock can crack your engine block. Check your coolant and oil levels before you restart. If coolant is low, you've got a leak that needs fixing before you ride again. If oil is low, same deal. Here's the reality check most riders need to hear. Fixing a minor cooling issue costs maybe a couple $100. A thermostat, some coolant, maybe a radiator hose. Rebuilding a top end because you cooked your piston and cylinder? That's $3,000 minimum, plus your bike is down for weeks. The traffic jam scenario is where most people mess this up. You're stuck in stop-and-go traffic on a hot day. Your temperature gauge is creeping up. Your cooling fan is running non-stop. And you think, I'll just tough it out until traffic clears. Don't. Find a safe spot to pull over. Let your bike cool down for 10 minutes. Yes, it's inconvenient. Yes, you'll get where you're going later than planned. But you'll get there on a bike that still runs instead of on the back of a tow truck. The reason riders ignore this stuff comes down to normalization. It's always run a little hot becomes an excuse. Warning lights get dismissed as faulty sensors. By the time you actually smell burning, the damage is already done. Your engine is a machine that follows physics, not wishful thinking. When it tells you something's wrong, listen. Conclusion. These 5 habits aren't complex mechanical mysteries. They're basic physics and common sense that nobody bothers teaching because they assume you already know. The difference between a bike that lasts 100,000 miles and one that needs a rebuild at 10,000 comes down to whether you're paying attention to what your engine needs. Drop a comment about which habit you're guilty of. I'll admit mine was cold start revving when I first started riding. Subscribe for more ways to avoid turning your bike into a money pit. Ride smart, keep the shiny side up,